Hello, and welcome to the Digital Boss Boardroom, where we share valuable and actionable knowledge specifically curated for small business owners like yourself to help you effectively market your business online while trying to create a little joy in this entrepreneurial journey we're all on. I'm your host, Bobbi Baehne, and this episode is brought to you by the digital marketing experts at Think Big, Go Local. Listen, we would love to connect with you, so be sure to stay to the end of the show and we'll give you all the best ways to get in touch with us. And we really want you to be part of this conversation. So please drop a comment, a like, share this, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of our upcoming value-packed episodes. All right, so let's get to it. Today, we're going to be talking about website accessibility. And I'm going to let our guest tell you all about what that means. So today, my guest is my business partner and the vice president of Think Big, Go Local, Mr. Brian Rugg, who is responsible for all of our website development, web design, everything that happens in that space, including SEO, Google Ads, all of those things. We're going to bring him on now and let him tell you a little bit more about himself.
Hey,
Brian. And anything in a bio you want to share with anybody before we get going?
First of all, I wanted to thank you for allowing me to be on the podcast. I'm glad I finally made the cut. So,
well, thanks. And I want to thank you for going and hanging out with me last night. We went to the coolest place. So we've got a new client. Brian's building a new website. Tell them a little bit about this place because it was really neat. And I know we've got some local people on here. If you're not local to McHenry County, sorry, hang tight, but we got to talk about this.
Come check it out when you're in town. So it's called The Glassmith, and it's in Richmond, Illinois, right near the Wisconsin border. It is a glass blowing pub, which I'm not sure anyone has ever heard of or even done before. So it is the coolest thing. It is, first of all, a beautiful bar. These guys built the whole place themselves. Lots of brick, copper. I mean, great looking bar. And then they have the glass blowing studio right there. So you can sit at the bar, enjoy a drink, and watch them blowing glass while you're doing it. And the stuff they make is amazing. They showed us a glass spider.
We're going to bring this up.
I'm not going to mention names, but somebody broke it. So anyway,
I didn't break it. I set it on the bar and the leg fell off. I was even being gentle. It was pretty sad though, because it was one solid piece of glass and it was huge. It was a big spider.
Probably 5 pounds. We couldn't decide how heavy it was, but
yeah, they probably hate it. I may not be allowed back. I'm not sure.
It was amazing. So, and these guys offer classes too, so you can actually learn how to blow glass, and you get to keep the thing you make. And anyway, it's really cool. It's richmondglassmith.com for a plug. Again, up in Richmond, Illinois, and it's the Glassmith. So
it was really cool. And an old friend of mine stopped by, and Brian left me there to have like 3 more drinks and hours more conversation. Thanks, Brian.
Yep, you're welcome.
No, which actually it was really fun. But I will say this: it's warm in there. Like, I think the thermostat's at 80 some degrees, which normally I would hate. I didn't, although every once in a while it was like, man,
that's why I left. No, it wasn't. Yeah, I didn't think it was that bad at all, actually.
No? Oh, man. Well, you know what? I had my back to that furnace, and every once in a while when they'd pull one of those, they use those big, long poles that they blow into. It was super, super cool. But anyways, great team building and client schmoozing last night. Like, loved it. Thanks for going out there. That was fun.
Yeah, that was a good time.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about making your website accessible. And I'm going to let Brian give all of this info. But I just wanted to say what sort of made me more aware of this is I teach college at McHenry County College, and I do some Lake County College courses also. And one of the things that the college had really opened my eyes to was the fact that I have students with disabilities, a wide range of different types of issues. And when I'm creating my online classes, I have to be really conscious about making sure that everybody can use that content, whether they're using a screen reader or if they have ADD and they're trying to focus. Like, so many different ways. So I've been kind of forced into being educated about this, having to take some training on it. And it's a game changer when you actually think about it, which I think a lot of us just don't. It's so, so important. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit about what the law is about it, and
Yeah.
we'll go from there.
All right. Yeah. So, website accessibility. I mean, basically, it's making sure your website works for people with disabilities. That can mean a lot of things. So Bobbi mentioned a few. I think when the topic of web accessibility comes up, quite often people think of people with visual impairment, blind people who most likely would be using a screen reader to have the website read out loud to them when they're on it. But there are many more disabilities. ADHD is one, which you might not have even considered. If you're prone to seizures, that can impact how you use the website. And if you're colorblind. So, and actually you mentioned your story at the college. I actually have a similar kind of story. I think in general, web accessibility, there's probably people watching this podcast that have never even heard the term and are completely unfamiliar with it. Certainly, I'm convinced most website owners have no clue about this, and it is something to be concerned about. But yeah, I first became aware of it 2010 or so. And so I worked for a very large corporation with hundreds of thousands of employees, and the corporate risk department came to us and said, we need to make the internal website, the intranet, accessible for people with disabilities. And we all had to do some research and understand what they were talking about and figure this out. And back then, it caused a bit of concern in the corporate circles. So the way this worked, I managed these projects. I had IT people who would do the work because, that at that scale was beyond me. So they would scope it out and come back and, okay, here's what it'll cost to do this. And I found it was taking longer than usual to get the estimate, and finally asked what's going on. I was told, well, just wait. You'll find out. Just wait. Okay, fine. But at the same time, I had my own higher ups like, all right, what's the delay? Finally, I got a call from the head of IT directly. And so that made me go, hello. Yeah. And he told me, we're sending you the estimate and we're standing behind it 100%. And it turned out it was going to cost $50 million to.
Oh my gosh. To make the website accessible. And we're standing by that. We need to.
Oh yeah. And that's why they called me directly to say, look, we're standing by that. Politics there too. But now there were other factors that could be the subject of an entire different podcast. But part of it was there was way too many pages on the intranet and they had to do all of it. So, but the process involved, and because it cost so much money, they would have to make each page accessible, test it, including with a screen reader, and then fix whatever they found wrong, and then test it again. Page by page by page, multiplied by a gazillion pages. So
you're going to have some easier tools for that than having to rebuild. Right. Awesome. Yeah, so, and I want to throw in there too. Well, first of all, you were talking about the color blindness, which I think a lot of people never think about, but my dad was colorblind. My son was colorblind, and we just found out my grandson's colorblind. So I see a lot of times, I am more conscious about colors that I know that they couldn't separate, and so I think people need to be so aware of that. And the other thing, man, I had another thought too, and now I forgot about it. It'll come to me, bro. Oh, I know what I was going to say is when we're talking about screen readers, and I think most people understand if there's copy on a website page that the screen reader will read the copy, but it's more than that. It's images and overlays and videos, and all of those things have to be optimized too, right?
Oh yeah. And I'll get into that too.
Okay.
Yeah. So and even you mentioned colorblind. So again, in my corporate job, I also spoke with a guy for about an hour, an employee who was colorblind. And he really opened my eyes to, he pointed out things on the screen. That's invisible to me. I can't see that. I can't see that.
Yeah.
Okay. We got to make some changes. So yeah. When you talk about web accessibility, there's really two primary areas of discussion. So one is the benefits, and then the other is sort of the legal landscape. So I'll cover the benefits first, go through the legal stuff, and then I will talk about and give some examples as to what does that look like on a website. So let's start with the benefits. So first and foremost, this one's easy. It's basically the right thing to do. So statistically, it's 20% of the population in the U.S. has some kind of disability. I have a note here. 61 million Americans is what
that's a lot. That's a big number.
Yeah. So you want to make sure your website is usable for everybody, and that's a sizable group. As a business owner, there's a side benefit because it can also help expand your customer base because, if your website isn't available to certain groups of people, then, you're getting less traffic, you're getting less possible customers. So that is one. Alongside that, your company, it can help your brand. You're displaying some social responsibility by ensuring the website is accessible. So, again, a benefit to you as a business in building your brand. Also, the work involved in improving your website and ensuring it is accessible, some of that work involved also just results in general overall improvements to your website usability. So that equates to website experience. So I'm kind of a usability nerd. Usability is just basically making sure your website is easy to use. I usually explain it with the negative first. So if you go to a website and you're like, wow, this sucks, it's because it has poor usability. Probably you can't find your way around. There's a lot of clutter. Things are hard to read. That is all plays into usability. And, when you're working to make your website accessible and improving it in that way, you are often improving some of the issues that result in poor usability for everyone.
Right, which means people stay on your site longer.
Yes.
All of those things feed into the SEO of your site, meaning, if those experiences are positive, they're going to show your site to more people down the road. So there's so many positives that build upon each other.
Yeah. And SEO is another one. So again, topic of another 20 different podcasts, I think. So, SEO is search engine optimization. And that impacts how your site ranks on search engines like Google. So again, the work involves some specific tasks required to be in compliance with web accessibility are also good SEO techniques. So making your website accessible can help improve your search optimization and hopefully result in better rankings on Google. Again, that's a huge separate topic, but I will explain a little bit how that also works when I explain what accessibility looks like. So finally, and we'll talk about legal. This can also reduce legal risk, but also believe it or not, there's a tax benefit. So you can get a tax credit for the expenses involved in being compliant with accessibility laws, and that includes making sure your website is accessible.
Is that for the costs that you might pay to a developer for any software that you're putting on? So all of that is got a tax benefit. Correct. I think when I talked about this in my group, because I don't think I mentioned that. Oh. I need to bring that piece back.
Well, that's too bad. Yeah. So I gotta check my notes again. So it's 50%. Well, so overall, and this will be a good segue, I guess, into the legal stuff. Overall, there's up to a $5,000 tax credit each year for a business working to be compliant with the Americans with Disability Act. So it's also 50% of expenses incurred in compliance, but the first 250 doesn't count. So there's more to it than that, but again, there is a tax benefit involved too. So I started with the benefits of accessibility first, because in the past, various companies have marketed their services focusing first and foremost on the legal part.
The fear-based marketing.
Exactly. So not like I started out, it's a good thing to do, and you should do it. So to focus first on, you should do it so you don't get sued. It's really not the right mindset, I think. So But let's talk about the week.
But
Sued, yeah. So the Americans with Disability Act, most of you have probably heard of it. It was enacted in 1993, I believe. So internet, not really a concern at the time. There was some discussion in the 2000s about including websites in the law itself, but that never really happened. And honestly, websites are still not specifically mentioned in the law itself. Now, this can get kind of convoluted. So, although they're not specifically mentioned in the law, what is mentioned in the law is that businesses must provide reasonable public accommodation for people with disabilities. So in more recent years, the Department of Justice has put out a memo saying we are going to treat websites like public spaces that require accommodation. So long and short of it is a legal requirement. And this is so again, when I mention this to people, that especially business owners, sometimes the reaction is, now what do they want us to do? So
yeah.
I understand that reaction. Also, the next question I get is, well, that doesn't apply to me. Or my website is only for certain people and it's all behind a password and that kind of thing. And if you have a website, you need to make sure it's accessible. That's the simplest way to put it. The idea, it's behind a password and it's only for certain people. Well, those people could have disabilities, even though it's not publicly available for everybody. If you're just B2B versus B2C, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, right?
Business people can have disabilities too. So,
and I just want to throw in there because we just recently, I think I jumped in on a Zoom call you had because it was on my calendar, so I enjoyed the first 2 minutes of it.
That's right.
But have been talking with some other web developers about this same topic. Yeah. And one of the things that's kind of amazing to me, I spoke about this in a networking group, and one person was interested, but it's a large group, and literally nobody had any interest in protecting themselves. And I know that these other web developers we were talking to are having that same experience. I mean, in all reality, the percentage of people that are taking this serious it seems to be really small, and I don't get it. And I know you're going to talk about some case studies because lawsuits are really expensive.
Yes. Yeah. So, and so to give you some examples, Domino's is probably the famous one. They were sued over, I believe it was someone could not order a pizza through the website. Yep. And they were sued and they had to pay a $6 million settlement. And then they also had to pay a lot of money to do all the work to make the site accessible. Now you're saying, well, I'm not Domino's. We have another client, a bridal shop, and they had asked me about this because they were aware of another bridal shop that was sued over the accessibility on their website. So that is a small business.
And I know when I spoke when I spoke on this, I know I pulled out a bunch of statistics, and the thing that's concerning is the increase year over year over the number of lawsuits that are happening specifically against small businesses, not necessarily the big brands, but all it takes is one individual who rightfully so is frustrated trying to get the information they're looking for. And, someone who is an advocate wants to make sure people are complying, wants to make sure other people aren't having a poor experience. Anybody can, they don't even have to actually have a disability, but maybe, know someone that does, or recognize, in all reality, you have someone that's upset with you and they see your website's not accessible, they can file the suit regardless, So, and it's definitely happening more and more frequently this year. 2023, it was like triple what it was the year before. Yep.
The number of lawsuits are increasing year over year. And sadly, there is a bit of a industry now built around lawsuits, and we have some attorneys that are valued clients. However, there are other attorneys out there who I would categorize in the ambulance chasing mode, where the goal is not better accessibility for everyone, but rather to make money through lawsuits. So there are literally firms that's all they do, and they are on the hunt.
And we were victims of that ourselves with not
Different issue.
with accessibility, but there's attorneys, there was law firms that do that over images as well.
Yeah.
It's very shady, but we ended up having to pay.
Technically, we were at fault. Technically,
but I mean, it's a game that they play, right? This is available now. You put it on your site, they pull the license, and then they turn around and send you a letter saying they're going to sue you, and then we're paying for something that at the time we could use. It's awful.
And I actually have a good example about, again, some of the lawsuits are genuine, right? But there are others that clearly the intent is not better accessibility, just money. And I actually have a good example I'll share when I go through what accessibility looks like. But yeah, so there is a definite legal risk, and again, it's required, right? And I will say, as web developers, we now include in all of our terms for web projects that we will not be held accountable for lawsuits related to accessibility. We do our best to follow accessibility guidelines, but to a certain extent, there's only so much we can do. Now, this is partially, we work using the WordPress platform. So there are some limitations. WordPress is the most widely used website builder, very stable platform. We use it for a variety of good reasons, but to a certain extent, there's only so much we are able to do. We do offer the option for an accessibility software app that helps bring your website into compliance, but we don't make it a requirement. It's up to the client. But yeah, I mean, there is some concern there. So, and legally, so I mentioned the ADA. So when these lawsuits occur, there's a standard that generally is the one held up in court. So it's called the WCAG. So these are web content accessibility guidelines. They're put together by a group called the World Wide Web Consortium. So again, I said the law is a little convoluted. The World Wide Web Consortium is not any kind of governmental agency or entity. They are a group of experts. They've been around for a long time that have forever been trying to develop standards for the internet, and especially for websites. So they're the ones that developed this standard. It's a very comprehensive standard. And so that's the one that's usually referenced in lawsuits. And therefore, that's the guidelines everybody follows when they're trying to make their website, when we say in compliance with accessibility, that's the standard, is what you're trying to comply with. So so that's kind of the legal landscape. And
even legally, I know you've said this to me before, it's because things are a little convoluted and it's not really clear cut.
Yeah.
In court, really one of the things that they kind of look for is, have you done your best? Have you done something to make sure, right? So even if there's, I mean, because you can have the right tools, you can have optimized things, and maybe someone still has a struggle. But in all reality, if you're in court and you're like, I used this tool, we paid to have this done, that really is a defense, to say we've done the best that we knew how to do.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't really comment on how well that will hold up or not. So there's no stopping a lawsuit.
Not stopping the lawsuit, but hopefully in your favor. If you're doing nothing, that's one thing. If you've done the best you can, that's another, right? So I know I was reading some of
so I saw a stat. It's 96% of all pages are not accessible.
I'm sure.
So odds are most of the internet is not accessible, and the goal is to make it more accessible. So so I mentioned that, for us, we offer what's called an overlay. It's a plugin, for lack of a better term, that uses AI to continually keep your site up to compliance with accessibility standards. The other option is to build it inherently in the site and then continually review it and make sure it's in compliance. The tricky part is, especially for small business owners, and this is where there's actually even a bit of controversy, right? So, and I guess I'll digress a little bit. So there is sort of if you do your research out there, you'll find varying opinions on the use of technology to make a website accessible. On the one hand, there's the people that provide that technology who are selling a product, and they want to make money on it. They want to make websites accessible. On the other side, there are groups like the American Association for the Blind, and who are very opposed to those kind of techniques. And their point of view is that you should include accessibility from the ground up when you build a website, and it's just something you should do, which is, again, a noble viewpoint, I think. But the reality is 96% of all pages are not accessible. And what are we going to do to address that? So for us, and again, with WordPress and some of the other issues there, we find the use of an overlay is a good option. And again, it continually works to keep the site up to date. And I think as technology improves and moves forward, I think those will get even better as we go on. So
were you going to mention the name of the tool we use? Because
yeah,
we can drop a link when we're done going live. We'll make sure there's a link that everyone can check it out at. So
yeah, the one we use is called Accessibility. It's a subscription-based platform. You add some code to the website, and it enables the use of the widget to make the improvements happen.
If you want to see how it works, by the way, go to thinkbiggolocal.com. It's right there on our website. There's a little blue icon, and you click that, and you can select the type of disability that you might be struggling with, and it adjusts in a variety of ways. It's actually really cool.
Yeah, and it does some things that we're not able to do directly. So that's just one. There are others out there. Again, or you can do the coding and everything directly is the other option. So we do a little of both, really. So
we have a comment. So I'm not sure who said it. I'm gonna guess it's James, but says this is a bigger deal than people think. I use compliance. I don't know that one, but I can do more. So yeah, and I think, and if that's who I think it is making that comment, phenomenal web developer that I work with every day as well. So, and then since we're throwing up some comments, Kent Jones, our podcast producer from 216 The Net, said he is he's amazed as a business owner about this topic and likes the ADHD part of it. That part's really cool. It actually gives you a little highlight bar so that you're only focusing on one part of the website. So if there's a lot of other information and you want to read slowly because you holler squirrel and you're all over the page, that's pretty cool. So he said he didn't know anything like that was possible. Yeah. So it is pretty awesome.
Yeah. So so let's talk about what accessibility on a website looks like. So, and to not make everybody's head spin, I just have some relatively simple examples. So first of all, if you see an image on a website, there's something behind the scenes called an alt tag. This is something that an alt tag is used to describe the picture. So you have a picture of a dog catching a Frisbee. The alt tag might say dog catching a Frisbee. Back in the day, if your browser didn't load up, you might see a little red X. Quite often, the alt tag would display the text there that says dog catching a Frisbee that you're not seeing here. Now, it's useful, though, for accessibility because a screen reader will read that alt tag out for people with visual impairment. I lost my train of thought. Okay, SEO. I have multiple lines of thinking on this, on the alt tags. So alt tags are also used as part of search optimization. Google will look for alt tags. So that's an SEO feature that you should have on your website. Your images should have alt tags. And then at the same time, it helps accessibility because it's useful for screen readers, among other things. So now back to the lawsuit industry. I'm aware of a company where the way this works, the lawyers will use automated tools to scan the website and flag anything that's a violation and not up to compliance. So the way these audit tools, there's audit tools for SEO as well, and they'll flag anything and everything. And sometimes I'll have clients, oh, we got an audit from company X and this thing is flagged. I'm like, yeah, it's flagged because the dumb audit tool is looking at the wrong thing. And here's exactly what they're saying the website doesn't have. So quit talking to those guys and just trust us. So the audit tools in this case flagged any image without an alt tag. Well, the rule really isn't add an alt tag to absolutely every image. The rule is to add an alt tag to an image where it makes sense to do so and is useful for the user. So an example is if you have a picture that is just a background for some other text, you don't want an alt tag on there because that'll interfere with the text on the background. And the point of that section of your website isn't the picture, it's the text on top of that picture, that background.
So that's interesting because in my college classes, when I'm creating the classes in our platform online, we have the ability, we will do alt tags for things like you said that are relevant to the class. You know, if there's a graph, if there's an image that's part of our teaching material. But I also, because I'm, a Virgo, I'm a perfectionist. I like everything to be pretty. So I have an image on every page that usually is it's just decorative, and it gives me an option to just hit this is decorative. So if a screen reader comes by, they realize it's irrelevant. Like, yes, it's here. You don't need to worry about it. The real value is somewhere else on the page.
Right. So by using a mindless audit tool to help your lawsuit and flagging everything, you're actually advocating for making the site less accessible because you're saying we're going to sue you unless you add alt tags to these pictures that shouldn't have alt tags. So
yeah, right.
Again, that drives me crazy, right? But that is a good example. And, on websites, it might be you're using a picture with text embedded on it that says, click here to start shopping. A screen reader won't read that. It'll just be a picture there. So you do need to have an alt tag for that kind of a use. Similarly, use descriptive links. So if you have a paragraph that says, go check out our or you're talking about, hey, here's our current products and you can see them all, click here. And that's your link is click here. Click here is not a useful link for anybody using various screen readers or anything else, or for SEO purposes. Better is a descriptive link such as view our product catalog. Or even better yet, learn about our legal services. That's a useful descriptive link, and it's also good for SEO because Google will look at links and see what they're in. And if your link just says click here, Google says, that's a link that says click here. If it says learn about our legal services, Google will say, oh, they have legal services and a page about that. That's linked. So we'll pay attention.
I also don't like click here. Click here just makes me feel like someone thinks I'm an idiot. I don't know why.
Just go away. Yeah.
Yeah, they should go away.
Of course, now I'm mentally cataloging all the websites.
That say click here. I know it's a popular button, but every time I see it, I'm like, duh, I know. I got it.
Yeah. So the click here dummy, the dummy is not said out loud. So it's okay. So another example is heading. So maybe this might get a little complicated, but headings on a web page, the page title is a heading. And there's a number behind the scenes in HTML, which websites pages are built using. But search engines will look at that. Screen readers will look at that. So there's a hierarchy, H1 through H6. You want to go in order. So, H1 at the top, if you've got a new section of content, use an H2 header. And then if you have bulleted content within that, use H3. When you get to a new topic, go back to H2. But you don't want to have an H2 and then an H5. That's out of order. So you want to have that hierarchy. And then one that's, I think, much easier to understand. And again, this applies to people with disabilities or not, your use of colors and text. So we talked about color blindness, high contrast. For a while, it was a design thing to use this sort of lighter gray text. I'll never understand that, but it looked fancier, I guess.
It was soft and minimalist.
Yeah. So, but there's not enough contrast, and that goes for just about everybody. Contrast is an important thing, right? So you don't want, blue text on a black background. That is hard, not just for people with visual impairments, but really just for anybody.
And with the color blindness thing, what I think people don't realize is the wide variety of color blindness there is. Like my son, it was the freakiest thing. We could do a bright orange line in the green grass when we were building something, and he literally, there was zero difference between orange and green, red and green, brown and green, like, so but then other people, it's blues and purples, so you just really don't know what somebody's not able to distinguish between.
Yeah, and if you want to get into the details, there's a percentage that you want to get to of contrast, but generally, if you have a dark background, use white text. If you have a light background, use black text, and avoid being too close in either direction. The other one is the fonts you use. The script fonts are really hard to read, no matter who you are on a website, especially if they're smaller. And if they're, the fancier they are, the harder they are to see. I get, as a designer,
they're pretty.
You want, right, and you want some elements that look, some visual appeal and all of that, but there's sort of a happy medium out there of visual appeal and good usability. So paragraph text, never, ever, that should be as plain as absolutely possible. Headings, yes, you can get away with some more variety there because headings are usually larger, but
right.
you don't want to go too crazy and it looks like someone's signature scribbled on the page. You can't do that. So those are some basic examples of accessibility and good usability on a website. And really, I think I don't know, I think I've said everything I can say about it at this point. So.
Well, that's a ton of really great information. And, and the reason I really wanted to do this is because the more you and I have learned about it, the more serious I realize that it is. We put it on our website. The cost to do this is for the tool that we use, and there's other tools. The tool we're going to drop the link to because it's what we know and use and can help you with is Accessibility, and that's less than $500 a year, right? Yeah. So you put it on, you subscribe to it, you renew it on an annual basis. I believe, I don't know if you have info on this, but when I was doing research recently, I think the average payout for a small business when someone calls you out and says your website's not accessible and they file a suit, even if you settle it, is in the ballpark of like $20,000 to $50,000. So that $500,
and you still have
a pretty good investment.
And you have to do the remediation after that too. So there's more expense there. So
I mean, it seems like such a no-brainer to me, and I've been shocked at how many small business owners just go right by it because it won't happen to me. I've said it won't happen to me a million times in my life, and it all happens to me. So, that just seems like a bad strategy.
And this will probably sound a little self-serving given what we do for a business, but you want to make sure when you engage with a web designer that they're aware of not just accessibility, but other legal requirements related to websites. So I don't know if we have a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
There are. So when we were talking about covering this subject, I thought about the other examples of things that business owners and website owners are just not aware of from a legal standpoint. And it's a little scary out there when I see these things. So another concern, I think, is having a privacy policy. And this is usually a link at the bottom of your website that most nobody will ever look at, and you may not even know it's there if you have one. But while there's no federal law requiring you to have a privacy policy on your website, when the policy defines how you treat people's private information, there are still laws that can impact you. So, for example, there's one in California that requires you have one. So if your website's available in California, and if you're on the internet, it's available on California.
Right, and people think because they don't live there or do business there that nobody's just,
Right,
absolutely.
So there's a big onerous one in the EU. Oh my gosh, the acronym's failing me right now, but
and I mean, and Brian, even if you don't work, like, for example, well, we have clients all over North America.
Yeah.
But let's just assume we primarily worked locally and we didn't really reach outside of our local market. If I put a blog on my website that is available in search to anybody looking for information that blog might satisfy, they could be in the EU or in California, and then the same rules apply.
Yeah, yeah. The GDPR in the EU, when that policy, that a lot of requirements for privacy. The day that went live, they sued Google for billions of dollars,
I remember.
like
I
that.
remember.
So now we all knew it was coming, but yeah. So privacy policy is one, and that's a relatively simple thing. There are any number of generators out there that will get you a free privacy policy. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how good those are necessarily, but better than nothing, right? Pretty boilerplate, but cover the basic bases, right? Another one, terms and conditions for your website. Again, not necessarily a legal requirement, but it does help limit your liability. So, for example, comments on blogs. If you have a blog and someone adds a comment and there's porn, child porn or something, who knows, right? Or they're libelous, who knows, that kind of stuff. It's technically on your website, even though it was their comment. So then you may be liable for that. Terms and conditions policy will define where you're liable, where you're not. It also is technically protects your content. I mean, if someone's going to steal your content, they're going to steal your content, and but at least you have a legal footing to stand on if you
Some
want.
remedy if you figure it out and you go after it.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's that too. So yeah, I mean, those are two other areas legally. And then you mentioned the photos is another one. If the photo's on Google, it's not free.
Oh my gosh. I know multiple people who have been sued for just grabbing photos and not understand. And it's more complicated than that. There's even free stock libraries that, as we've learned, can be pretty shady if you don't really understand their terms and conditions.
Yes. Yeah. So, and that's a good question to ask your designer. Hey, where are you getting the photos? So we use the Adobe stock library, which allows us to license every photo we use on a website. The license is yours and it's good forever, as long as you don't use that photo and print 10,000 t-shirts or something like that. But, for web use, it's yours and you have it for good. So there's no trouble there. But, you get that picture off the internet for free. Somebody owns that copyright and they can come after you if it's on your website. So,
and they will.
Yes.
I think of all the website type liability things that I've personally experienced, that is the number one. Like, that's it.
Yeah. And the easiest one to get caught up in, because in Google, side note, some years ago, you could adjust image search to look for, I forget the way.
You can't do that anymore, can you?
Copyright free or something along those lines, which wasn't really true. And I see they did take that away.
They did. I tried to use it a few weeks ago, and I was like, "What happened to that option where it would let you separate what was copywritten, what?"
Right. I'm hoping they got sued over it at some point, because they deserve it for having that out there, because those pictures really weren't. But I'm sure.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah. So,
and then someone popped on here and said, "Yep, never use an image from Google Images." Yes, for sure, for sure.
Yep.
Awesome. So, anything else to throw in there? This is really good info, and I really hope that small business owners are paying attention. Only because I don't want to see any of my fellow small business owners end up with a hardship that, I don't know. I know there's a lot of businesses. A $50,000 lawsuit could mean the doors close. And all it costs you is $500 to solve that problem. And like you said, I'm really focusing on the liability, but at the end of the day, you're doing a good thing. You're, making the web in general more accessible, expanding your client base, showing goodwill and just the kind of business owner you are. I love when I look at our website and I just think that people would come there and be like, this is really cool. Like, how thoughtful of them, because maybe they hadn't thought about that, and I think it makes you look like a well-rounded, thoughtful business owner. Yeah,
I agree. Totally.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate you getting all this info together. And like I said, we will drop in all the places. I'll drop a link to Accessibility. So if anyone wants to check it out, you can take a look. If you want to just see how it works, check out thinkbiggolocal.com, and you'll see it's like generally the lower left-hand corner of, if you're looking at your screen, lower left-hand corner, you'll see a little icon and it'll pop open a whole big display that you can choose and kind of play around, see what it looks like.
All right.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I hope I get to come back sometime.
Maybe come up with something interesting. No, yeah, absolutely. It's fun doing these together. All right. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. And thanks for everybody that dropped a comment in here. If you've got any feedback on this episode, or if you'd like to talk to us, even in a future podcast, drop us a comment or connect with us in your favorite social media channel. You can find us at Think Big Go Local in all the socials all over the place. And you're always welcome to connect with me directly on LinkedIn. I believe in the show description, my LinkedIn link is there, because this year I've committed to using it more. If you watched our episode last week, we talked all about LinkedIn. It was awesome. And I've been on every day, just like I said I would. So that's in the description. And also, we're always looking for guests. So if you are an expert in any field related to digital marketing or even business management, let us know. We'd love to have you on. Or if you've just had an experience as a small business owner that you think is worth sharing and a topic worth talking about, get in touch with me. We'd love to have you here as well. So I will be back here next week, Friday at noon. And I'm really excited about my guest next week. So if you're local, you probably have listened to Star 105.5 and know Joe Cicero. I ran into him the other night and he had seen our first podcast episode and said, I want to come on with you. Joe has a huge following between the radio. He's a photographer. He's got a personal brand. And we're going to talk all about building a personal brand, which we touched on a little bit last week, because it's so important that you are connecting with people outside your business and not just being known for the name of your business and your logo. People like to work with people they really know. And so building a personal brand in addition to what you're doing with your business is huge. So he's going to talk all about that with us. And since his is pretty large, we're going to talk about how you manage that as your brand grows and your followers grow. So that'll be next week at noon. Super excited to have him on. And until then, we hope all of you bosses have a kick-ass weekend and a badass, productive, and profitable week next week. We will see you all soon. Thanks.